A very warm welcome to Hyde Park. On our segment tonight, we thought of talking about the role of women in counter-radicalization and disengagement processes. Of course, given Sri Lanka's current situation, we thought this was apt to discuss Sri Lanka at the present state and going forward, what we should do and how we engage women in the process going forward. I've invited a panel I believe best suits this discussion. Let me warmly welcome Sister Canis, Fernando, Madam Fairil Ashraf and Dr. Mal Hettiarachchi. To give you an introduction of Sister Canis, she has contributed largely to the education and reconciliation sector, especially mentoring thousands of young people over several years. And Sister Canis has also worked, is a professional counselor and has mentored thousands of young people, as I said, worked with the Army for training and rehabilitation, also involved in interfaith dialogue and reconciliation in Sri Lanka. A very warm welcome to you, Sister Canis. And to introduce Madam Fairil Ashraf, of course, she too needs no introduction, but former parliamentarian, a former minister, a former diplomat, and she is retired from active politics, but is seen here today given the present context of Sri Lankan society and is willing to share her views and thoughts. I believe she is the personification of the identity of a Sri Lankan Muslim. Moving on, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mal Hettiarachchi, who too has a lot of experience, a wealth of experience in research and programs of de-radicalization and rehabilitation. For the past decade, Dr. Mal Hettiarachchi has focused on rehabilitation, worked with different country programs on reconciliation and such projects. So I believe this is going to be a fruitful discussion. A warm welcome to you too. And I'd like to start off this discussion with Sister Canis here. What have you got to say about Sri Lanka today? Yes, it has been a very difficult time for us since the 21st of April when Easter worshippers were attacked. And this came as a shock to Sri Lanka. But today, are we heading into a different state?
The news of April 21st, Easter Sunday, was a shock to us, heartbreaking news to us. But see, the Christians heeded the leaders' words, and they kept quiet. In the sense, I know when I visited Katuapitiya, there was anger in their hearts, but they maintained peace, and they promoted reconciliation within themselves, and they wanted to forgive. And forgiveness is one of our main characteristics in Christianity. So we had a peaceful, in a way, a peaceful Sri Lanka. There were no other conflicts that erupted after 21st April. But today it has taken a different turn. And I'm wondering what really has happened to Sri Lanka, because the violence that is buried deep in our hearts, and it's coming out, provoked by different groups, I think. I have a feeling that it's being provoked. And the question is for me, see, our values have deteriorated, and we have no respect for life in Sri Lanka today. Most of our people are pursuing wealth, popularity, power, and violence contained in these terms, in the sense of pursuing wealth, power and popularity, there is violence underneath, because without competition, competing with each other, so without violence there cannot be this kind of power and wealth and all that. So we have not gone into the causes of our reactions and the violence that is there. So it is for us as women, it is an opportune moment to stand for life and nurturing life and protecting life. So as Christian, as women, our role is to promote this the value of life, the dignity of the human being, and to recognize each other as human beings and not as Tamils or Sinhalese or Muslims or Buddhists or Christians or whatever. Yes.
Madam Ashraf, have we forgotten that we are all Sri Lankans here? Have we forgotten at this point that despite the faith or religion that we follow, that we are all part of one nation?
Endeavoring to answer your question in the first place, to forget, did we ever know that we were Sri Lankans? You know, my question is that, were we ever taught to think Sri Lankan, right? We were always taught to think of ourselves as Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, or Burghers, or Malays, or whatever. Nobody ever wanted to foster the idea of a Sri Lankan identity, right? So, I mean, there's no question of forgetting because we never had it, right? You can take the schools, for instance. We have the Sinhala Buddhist schools, we have the Hindu schools, the Catholic schools, the Muslim schools. And when a child is, say, nowadays even 4, they go into the nursery classes also at the same level, and then they go right up to university being a Sinhala Buddhist or a Muslim, and at the university perhaps they meet the others and then they are suddenly told, hey, you're Sri Lankan, and then they turn around to ask, what is Sri Lankan, right? Because we don't have it in us, and we have, I think very unfortunately, never taken the trouble to bring about that identity into us. And I think that's part of the problem, because we are seeing the other as not as a common Sri Lankan, but as somebody else. He's from a different community. He does not belong to us, right? I am one and he is another. So it's very easy to bring about, I mean, confusion between us, because we are not commoners, we are not Sri Lankans. So I think part of the problem is that. And as women, I feel, frankly, I'm very depressed right now, right? And as women, I kind of feel, you know, they say the woman is the one who rocks the cradle, right? And the one to bring up, the one to rule the world. But have we gone wrong somewhere? Have we gone wrong in the manner in which we rock the cradle? Are these products that we see now products of ours? Have women got to take a better role, a better responsibility of bringing out better Sri Lankans who love each other?
Dr. Malhettiarachchi, I think on that note, I'd like to move on to you. You have, as I mentioned, a lot of experience dealing with situations as this in de-radicalization of those who have taken up extremist ideologies and in the work of reconciliation. But looking at Sri Lanka today, yes, we've come out of the Easter Sunday attacks, and now it completely has turned out to be violent incidents at several areas of the country. But where are we heading now?
In Diwali, the Easter Sunday attacks were perpetrated by a small group of extremists. And today we are thinking that the Muslim community is homogenous. that everybody is responsible. So I think the general public must understand that the attacks were conducted by a small network, and the individual responsible, I do not even want to mention the name, responsible for the attacks was somebody who was rejected by the schools he studied, threw him out, and he was rejected by all the groups he tried to join. So this tells us that largely the Muslim community rejected this man, and then he plugged himself into a global ideology. So for us as Sri Lankans to divert anger to the general Muslim population that resisted such an individual with such an extremist ideology is baseless. So I see today what happened with the Easter Sunday attacks. They couldn't divide the community because the community, the Muslim community was sad about the attacks. We always forget that we had the 3 church bombings and we had the hotel bombings. And we forget that in the hotel bombings, all communities died. We only speak about the foreigners, but Sinhalese Muslims died in the hotel bombings, but we don't talk about it. I think we have to remember that this was an attack on the entire community. So we need to remember that we must not go out and in the pretext of being patriotic do any harm to any community, because what they couldn't achieve on the 21st, they are beginning to splinter the community now. And those of us who are standing by and saying nothing, if those of us who see attack happening and don't do anything, we are complicit. So we have to stand up together as a community, Sri Lankan community, against this. So I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because in spite of several bashings that we have had in Sri Lanka over the different conflicts we've had, we've still stood together. And we must remember that we didn't completely fall with the LTT issue, and we are not going to fall with the IS issue, because I feel that we have come together more than before.
Since 2014, with the emergence of the so-called Islamic State and its proactive recruitment of women, interest in the links between women, war and different forms of political violence has increased. And Sister Canis, I'd like to talk about this with you. You've been doing a lot of counseling work. You're a professional counselor. Many states have long prioritized on either so-called hard approaches to this, and now since recent times we're also talking about soft approaches, be it dialogue or cooperation, and focus on non-approaches that were traditional. What's the way forward now?
The way forward for us is to get together as as women. I feel we have a special role because women are connectors. We are specialized in connecting, and if we can build up networks of women and networks of women, of all women, not Muslim women or not Buddhist women, but all women, and look at them as women. And if we can build up connections and networks with women, we can share. I have experience of sharing, between young people from the north and the south. And when they came together, they were scared of looking at each other. They were scared. because the Sinhalese thought the people in the north, the young people in the north were all terrorists, all tigers. And the north people, the young people in the north, they thought that the young people in the south hated them. So they were scared of each other. But when they started storytelling, when they started sharing, and the same with widows from the north and the south, when they started sharing, there was solidarity built. That solidarity that helped them to stand by each other, and we need to exploit the powers, the inner powers of women, and build solidarity among women, and networks among women. Who see, we as women, we feel and we are passionate about certain things, and we have to become passionate about building lives, bringing about better lives.
To be able to bring people together to see that we are all the same.
Yes, and to respect the humanity
Yes.
of each other.
Yes.
And to recognize each other as human beings.
Right. Before we talk further on approaches that we need, Madam Ashraf, I'd like to focus on political Islam in relation to especially recent times. I'd like to divert your attention to a cable leak in 2013 from the US Embassy in Colombo to Washington. Here we are talking about political Islam in Sri Lanka, and points out to growing practices of non-traditional beliefs here in Sri Lanka. What have you got to say? What's your take on this? Is this what hit Sri Lanka? Are we interpreting Islam, the Islam doctrine, wrong here in Sri Lanka now?
Yeah. You know, yes, interpretations. We have various interpretations of the Holy Quran, that the language per se is something that we don't understand. So even amongst the ones who have understood the language, we have various interpretations. But when you talk of political Islam, I don't think we ever had anything called a political Islam in Sri Lanka. Political movements, yes, amongst the Muslims we did have, but Islam per se as a tool of politics, I don't think we ever had, right? But more than saying we have brought in a new doctrine, I would say we brought in a new culture. Right, a culture we were not familiar with. We, having been used to a Sri Lankan Muslim culture, we suddenly see the Arabization. Everything became more Arab-like. We were more Middle Eastern-like.
How did this happen?
Yes, I strongly believe, subject to correction in Divari, I believe that when the doors were open to the Middle East, right, where we even sent our women as housemaids, right, and we sent our men over there. I mean, they got used to a new culture, and they found it to be a very convenient culture also, whenever it suited them. Take, for instance, the black garb they wear. I mean, it's almost an overcoat, right? I mean, you don't have to worry much about how you present yourself. Right? Details are all covered out there, right? Islam talks about modesty, but Islam doesn't talk about color or shape of dress, right? We are supposed to be dressed modestly, and Sri Lankan Muslims were always dressed modestly, right? Those who were concerned about it. But when this came in, some of the people in Sri Lanka found it to be a very convenient garment, right, where you don't have to go into details, right, it's just an overcoat. So people found it easy, and I think that was the reason why it became this popular, right, the color. I mean, there was no difference between people. When they wore it, it was basically an equalizer, right. Your financial status, your status in society was all kind of, brought to equal levels by this black garb, which made a big difference in the minds of people.
Sorry to bother you here. You are a Sri Lankan female Muslim.
Yes.
You don't wear a separate face scarf or
No.
headscarf.
No.
Elaborate on this. I mean, you use the sari. I've been observing you. This is something we've seen
Yes.
so many years. But in the recent past, as you mentioned,
Yes.
Increasingly we saw the use of burqa, hijab. Is this something that goes in line with the Sri Lankan Muslim identity?
See, when things are introduced to you in the name of religion, there sets a sense of fear. You don't try to argue on religion, right? So when somebody tries to tell you you are a better Muslim when you do it in a particular way, there may be people who would want to also be better Muslims. So if this is shown to be like, this, when you wear this, you are a better Muslim, right? And if you don't wear this, you are not up to the level of a better Muslim. There again, I think it's a matter of how you are educated and what spirituality means to you. How much do you know about what Islam talks about? So in Sri Lanka, like very unfortunately, in all aspects, not just Islam, not just religion, we tend to take things for granted, right? We don't go into details, right? We just accept anything, and we don't value what we've had in this beautiful island of ours, right? We take everything for granted, and we are very willing, we are open to take everything that comes from outside.
Yes.
Right? So there again, I would talk again about the Sri Lankan identity and giving this opportunity of Sri Lankans to unite, to hold hands together, so that we don't open our gates so freely to everything that comes from outside. We should be content with ourselves.
We'll talk more on that, Madam Ashraf. Dr. Mal, something I'd like to ask you about now is, given the growing tensions, yes, the security forces are working to contain what's happening here in Sri Lanka, but then there is a certain force that even we heard His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit speaking yesterday about the kind of forces that are behind the violence that is instigated in Sri Lanka. I'd like to actually take a look at what His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit had to say.
We must learn to build a new Sri Lanka where all these religions and races coexist and where we can exist in peace and harmony. So we should not allow selfish motives to disturb that peace. We hear that some of these groups are politically aligned groups of one group or the other. We ask all those political leaders to control their members, to ensure they don't take the law into their own hands.
How much of Christian Catholic involvement in this crisis?
What we see is it's a more political crisis. A political crisis where certain political parties and their agents, they run out of control and they go and attack unnecessarily these people.
Archbishop, increasingly we see instances where the government Muslim ministers are coming under various allegations from society in general about aiding and abetting and possible involvement. Also, we find on the other hand that government ministers responsible for example, Muslim cultural affairs, giving greater to ludicrous answers when queried as to how swords in the numbers that they are being found are being discovered in mosques. Now, what if at all is a message that you can give to the Muslim political leaders? That's the idea.
I think Muslim political leaders must be authentic to what their faith is teaching them. The core values of Islam. The core values of Islam, if we live that faithfully, then we cannot behave in a certain way. Problem that happens is that we use religion for our own selfish purposes. Many years ago, some powerful Christians came to see me and wanted to form a Christian political party. I told them to get out of my door. It is time that in Sri Lanka we overcome that kind of mentality, considering religion as something that is private and that is to be worshipped by the people, consistency, and not to be mixed with politics. I feel that such political parties should be not allowed constitutionally. That's how it should be. So political parties should be Sri Lankan national political parties. And then any minority candidate should be able to come up from the political parties and become president or prime minister. But he or she must respect the religious nature of the country.
කාදිනල්තුමා ඕනම අවස්ථාවක නිර්භයව ප්‍රසිද්ධියේ එතුමා කියන එක මේ සිංහල බෞද්ධ රටක්. එතුමා එහෙම කියද්දී ඉතින් අනිත් අය මේ හරක් වගේ කතා කරලා හරියන්නේ නැහැ.
මේ රටේ බුද්ධ ආගම පැතිරිලා තියෙන එක අපිට තර්ජනයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක අපිට තර්ජනයක් කියලා හිතන්න හොඳත් නැහැ. ඒක අපිට ආශිර්වාදයක් විය හැකියි කියලා හිතුවොත් හොඳයි.
Are we playing into the hands of terrorists?
We certainly are playing into the hands of terrorists, because to radicalize an individual or a community, there has to be societal priming. So there has to be push factors and pull factors that come in. So when we have incidences like this, they become push factors. And if we look at all the images that came out, statements that are coming out, these are going to be all pull factors. They will pull, they'll be using these to pull individuals towards the radical, violent radical end of the spectrum. I think we should be clear. Being radical is not necessarily a bad thing. I think many of us are radical. But violent radicalization is the problem here. I mean, watching the clip that you just played, I think the community is coming up with better leadership, telling this is not what we want. I looked at some of the clips that came out of the incidents in the northwestern region yesterday, day before yesterday, and it is the ordinary grassroots people saying, these people came from outside. We lived in harmony. This has never happened, even during the time of the LTT. I'm a psychologist. I'm bound by certain ethical principles. And there are basic ethics of when we do things, say things, and behave. We have to be responsible for the impact it causes on the community. So if I say something, I need to be cognizant and aware of how it will impact society. So we are hopefully bringing in an act against hate speech. I think that should be implemented also by our leaders, and they should be brought within that framework. If a medical professional or any professional comes under a code of conduct, why do the leaders that we appoint, why are they exempt from it? They need to come under that ethical code of conduct. I will work with maximum 100 people. People we have put there to lead us work with 21 million. So when they open their mouth and say something, they have to be cognizant of the impact it causes on the community. You cannot appease a small segment and anger the rest. So we have to really rethink as civilians, as people, whom do we want there, and whether they are willing to come within this umbrella of ethical practice. It's a long shot, but I believe the Cardinal gave us leadership at a time that we needed, right? And I think that is leadership.
I think you raised a very valid discussion, actually a point here in today's context. Madam Ashraf, you've been a former politician, a parliamentarian, a minister. How do you see the behavior of our politicians here today? Are we actually missing out on going forward to achieve a coherent strategy in countering what's happening here? Or is this blame game continuing? How do you see the way forward?
very unfair endeavor for me to, for me to.
No, I mean, I really like what
comment
Dr.
about
Dr.
Yes,
Mal said.
I-
I mean, that's a very valid point
Correct,
today.
I understand. But at the same time, isn't it a vicious cycle? Right? I mean, we have trained our people to expect something, right? We have not given them guidance on matters. So the expectations are met by those who they elect, right? And those elected represent them, and people are happy with them. You see, I mean, how could I say this is not the correct way to behave when they, with their constituents, are able to win that vote and represent them in parliament? I mean, this is what is expected by the constituents, right? So where are we going wrong? Which is that, where are we trying to break it? I mean, what is the norm? What are they wanting?
I'm not
Are
sure
we-
if people
yes,
are actually
so-
happy with their choices.
No, but
with any of their choices.
maybe,
Yes, and
with all
maybe.
225.
No, listen,
It's
they-
a challenge for us.
Yeah, no, they do complain whenever it suits them. But given that valid vote, that's a very valuable vote, right? Do they even know the value of that vote? Have we taught the citizen, right, the rights of that citizen? Why you cast a vote? Why you select somebody or elect somebody? So it's very easy to find fault, right? You sit back when something goes wrong, then we are all armchair critics and we can criticize them because they are there. But aren't they a representative of the nation that we are in? Are they not the mirror? Are we not seeing mirror images of our own selves? Don't we need corrections all over? Is it only the 225 there that we want to correct? I think it's a bigger picture. I always feel it's a mirror image that you see of yourself, right? So you correct yourself, you correct your expectations, you learn what it is to be a citizen of this country. Everything will come right, right?
I
think
agree.
this is something to add.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yes,
But on the other hand,
yes,
when we elect somebody,
yes, sister.
we are giving them some kind of responsibility.
Yes, sister.
And they must question whether, because see, when we elect, we are electing people for the welfare of the country, for welfare of the nation, and they have to be conscious of the responsibility that they are given. And the question that I have is, are they conscious of the responsibility that they are given? Are they faithful to their mission,
Sister,
the mission they are entrusted to?
yes, sister, if you
entrusted with?
ask every individual out there, if you ask them, they would tell you, yes, we are doing this for you. But the way you expect, you perceive what they are doing, and how they perceive what they are expected to do are very different.
Yes, but then there is what we see today
Yes.
is a struggle for power.
Yes.
And the preservation of that power. මොන විදිහකින් හරි බලය තියාගන්නයි බලන්නේ. එතකොට ඒ වගේ මොන විදිහකින් හරි බලය තියාගන්න උත්සාහ කරන politiciansලා අපිට ඕනේ නැහැ.
හැබැයි politics කියන්නේම sister ඒක තමයි.
I feel in Divari that we have to start looking, I would say from educational background,
Yes.
we have to start looking
Yes.
at
Yes.
that.
Yes.
At least we might not see it in our lifetime, but
Yes.
at least for the
Later.
future, we should start with the educational process, the leadership. We have to have civic education. We have to
Correct.
have ethics, moral
Yes.
behavior taught in schools. I think it was taught way back then.
Yes, we learned civics,
because
right?
අපි
Sister Canis was my school principal. So I know that we were given that. during a particular time. I'm not saying it's not given now, but it is. But we have to have, I'm not saying minimum educational, behavioral criteria and assessment for parliamentarians. I'm not saying we should have minimal. I think we should have the maximum standard put in there. I don't know whether we even have the minimal at the moment. But I think from down there we have to build up leadership. And I think we have young people who can get in there and do some work. I'm not hopeless, I'm determined to be hopeful. I think there are people, but we have to rethink about what we have done to ourselves.
I really like your optimism here and the kind of positivity you bring here. But Dr. Mal, Sri Lanka is really too late even at this present juncture in formulating policy regulation. We need to do it as soon as possible, as and when, you know, as immediately as possible. Where do we begin here?
We need systems in Devari. We are very unfortunately a country without systems. We depend on individuals to do things. We don't have systems in place. You know, when one particular parliamentarian, we say, yeah, he's very good. Another parliamentarian, he's no good. There is no system in the thing. So I think, I don't know, Mal, if you agree, I think we need to put systems into place and then put individuals into those slots. Not put individuals and then start making systems.
And we also need principles.
Yes, maybe, yes.
Principles and values.
Successful nations have policy. They don't tamper with policy.
Right.
But here in Sri Lanka, policy changes when government changes.
Because we don't have policy. We don't have that system in place.
We don't have that structure in place to continue the good policies.
Yes.
For generations, I believe our politicians have either failed the people or the people have been badly misled. But going forward, because now in Sri Lanka, 10 years after the end of war, we saw a new wave of terrorism. Easter Sunday attacks took the entire nation by shock. Yes, entirely debatable about the intelligence information that was available, but let's not go there because the aim of this program is to talk about women and what we need to do now. But going forward, we're here, we're talking about social media bans. Is this really necessary? And the other question about engaging young people, empowering women. And I'm just trying to put all topics here so that we can engage in this dialogue. And also stigmatizing one single societal group. Is that what we're heading at?
Mal was talking about education of young people. I have experience with young people because I still teach in certain, I teach at Aquinas. And the group that I have, when I was doing communication and when I gave them a topic to talk about the Sri Lankan situation today, they were all talking about change. We need change. And they were telling, in terms of the systems that we are talking about. Okay. And even education system, they were talking about the education system. And they were also talking about the attitudes that we have as Sri Lankans. And they were talking about the dignity of labor. And they were saying that the labor is not respected in Sri Lanka. See, if you are a mason, if you are a carpenter, you are a professional carpenter or you are a professional, and treat the person as a professional, not as see, it's a lower kind of job. The grade is lower. And if you are an engineer, the doctor, if you are a doctor, the profession is higher. So this kind of division or discrimination should not be there, they were saying. And young people were saying that. And I was very happy when they, and then I said, okay, let's change the society. Then they were telling me, okay, we are ready, we are ready to work with you. And I have planned a kind of youth education program to train young people for leadership, and also for to give them a certain knowledge of political education, what it is to be a political leader.
Something that comes to my mind is it the responsibility of a certain societal group to counter radicalization, what's happening here? Yes, as I mentioned, we saw a new wave of terrorism, extremist ideologies coming into Sri Lanka, and then eventually as a post product of the acts of these terrorists, we see the stigmatization of certain groups in society. What do we do here?
I think just picking up from what also Sister said, that we have and going also onto the theme of women, I think there's a big role that the females can play in education, because within schools this has to be picked up and corrected, and when we teach young people and children, we have to be very careful that we do not marginalize, or we build, rather that we build up a national identity of Sri Lankan, because we have several ethnic groups. So the moment something happens, there's a tendency to stigmatize the other or the different other. So this could be a visible minority, or a different faith, or a different ethnic group. And all these issues that we are having with attitudinal problems, the way we see the different other, schools, within schools, we can, not only covering the syllabus, but this aspect can be done in schools, because we are able to touch a broad base of the next generation. And within homes, the moms have so much clout. When you speak to some of these individuals in rehabilitation globally, when you speak with some of the terrorists, and I would ask them, who is the person closest to your heart? It's the mother. It's the mother. It's incredible. They say when you get thrown in jail, your friends come for the first few months, and finally at the end of the year, the only person who visits is the mother. So I think women, mums, sisters have grandparents, grandmoms have a lot of influence. I think we should harness this. We should harness this and nurture it, because they are primary, they have a lot of emotional control over the family system, and the family and mums can pick up signs of radicalization as they are coming up.
How?
They can be the individuals who will give a counter point if there is racist language used within the household, derogatory terms against another ethnic group. They can always counter it. They can give another perspective and guide and channel, because as human beings, we are not only nice, positive people, we have a mean side to us. But if we nurture the mean side, we will do mean and nasty things.
You spoke about early signs. What are these? If you can elaborate on this, I think this is very important at this point.
Early signs, when nobody is born as a terrorist, there's a processes and a pathway into which that you are taken down. So yes, we have at the moment a lot of grievances from all communities at the moment. The Muslim community has grievances, the Catholic community that lost life, the Sinhala community, the Muslims who lost life but nobody acknowledges it. because it was an IS attack. There are feelings of guilt, sadness in every community.
Leading to hatred.
That can be harnessed by individuals, groups, to shift a person towards the radicalization, violent radicalization end of the spectrum. This is what I refer to as societal priming. So, a person, as the person is shifting, you see certain changes in the individual. And this I am not referring to as only for people who have been exposed to IS ideology. I am also referring to individuals who are being racist basically. As they are shifting down that spectrum, the first people to see those changes are friends. In the house you see it. You see that your child is beginning to disengage from the previous network of friends and move towards another. There might be literature. The things that I said, the words that are used to describe the other. So you can see the hatred build up. You can see a sense of exclusivism coming in. No, that we cannot have all these mixed dialogues, all these things, they are useless. So you see that gradual build up happening. And these signs are picked up initially by family and friends. It is just that we might not know they are the signs and symptoms. But in other countries, they have set up groups where mums call and in a safe to a helpline and say, I'm worried about my son because I can see certain patterns changing. Now that doesn't mean we are going to have a huge security response to that, but it is a safe space for mums who are worried about their child going down a negative path, because with social media, globalization, any child in any family can be pulled into this if they are groomed into it. So where do the mothers go? All those people who died. Some families show that it is a heroic deed my child did, but 99% there is sadness and regret.
Mrs. Ashraf, I know you have a lot to add to this, but something I'd also like to talk about is, in a study it says that women radicalized by Islamic State ideology are taking their children's lives and their own in pursuit of martyrdom. We saw this in Sri Lanka too. How concerning is this as a nation and as the community too?
Oh, it's terrible to even think about it, right? But thankfully, I'm very optimistic. I don't think that has got into the society or the Muslim community as yet. Everybody I speak to is shocked that something like this could happen. Like continuing from what Mal was saying, you know, when we talk of education, now she says mothers, right, family members, women. I mean, you know, we fought a civil war for 30 long years, and we ended the war in 2009, and we've been quite peaceful all these days, or so we thought. But the thing is, as Sri Lankans, as women, education seems to be ending when you leave school, right? I mean, the system that we are in. Right? What we mean by awareness or education is like you go to school, you learn whatever, and then you lead your own life. There is no engagement of those women thereafter. Like in Colombo or in the big cities, maybe there are various organizations and they continue to talk. But most of the time, right, in the country, so we as a people who have faced a civil war and now in the process of going into something else, it's high time that we started talking about these things, you know. We do see on TV most of the time it's about the politician talking whatever. I'm not talking about those, but to go to individuals, go to groups, talk to people, talk about what's happening in this country, where all this is going to take us, what happens if we start dividing, you know, amongst us. So things like that. When she spoke of education and about children, I'm saying educating the rest of us the rest of the nation, we need education, we need awareness, and if we are unable to do it now, I think we are heading towards disaster. At least this particular moment, I think, I told you, I came out of, I'm a retiree, I've been out of it all, but I came out now because I think I have a role to play, and I want to play. I want to go before women and tell women what they could do to help Sri Lanka get to a better place. Like what she said, when you see your son, right, become exclusive in something, wanting to do something different, what does the mother do? What does the sister do? I think we should start talking. This should come onto the public platform.
Right, and very quickly, Sister Canis, I'd like to talk to you about this before. That's all the time we have on the program, but talking about women empowerment and women's role in situations as these. Women are usually, I thought, to be emotional, but how can we use this in countering what's happening?
I was thinking, while Mal was talking about women, I was thinking the gift of a woman is intuition. See, the woman intuits and
Very.
yes,
Yes.
very intuitive.
Yes.
And there is an inner knowing that in a woman. So we need to develop that inner knowing. And there is also, we talk of feminine energy. The feminine energy is also divine wisdom. And we need to develop that divine wisdom among women. So see, what we do in empowerment is developing the inner resources of a woman, helping the woman to become more and more conscious. And when the woman becomes more and more conscious, she will also, through intuition, she will also see the possibilities in life and possibilities for transformation in society. And we need to engage women in transforming society through their intuition and through their divine wisdom.
Thank you very much, Sister Canis, for all your thoughts. Madam Farial Ashraf, thank you for coming over to our studios, especially as a retiree. You weren't seen previously after retirement, much on media platforms, but thank you for your presence here. And Dr. Mal Hettiarachchi, thank you for your expertise on our show. Well, we were talking about the role of women in counter-radicalization, extremism and de-radicalization. We will join you soon with yet another fruitful discussion.